have Lysandra here today. And so I'm just going to introduce myself for 1 second really quickly. My name is Kendall Potskin. I am the founder of Cultural Creatives, and I am very excited about this community. It's very new, and honestly, I could have named it Dream Guardians because that's a lot of the inspiration that I have is each person within the community and that we interview, I do consider a dream guardian. And so thank you, Lysandra, for protecting your dreams and inspiring others as well. So let's get to know a little bit about you.
Yeah, well, thank you so much, Kendall, for having me. Buju, Anin, everyone who's watching this. Lysandra, nothing. In addition to Kaz, I do go by Anawtin, which is my original Ojibwe last name, which means calm wind. And so originally I am from Northwestern Ontario, Treaty 9. So my nation is Bearskin Lake First Nation. I am Anishinaabe Kwe. But I've been living in Mohkinstsis, which is Calgary, for the last 10 years or so. So lucky to have a home back in Ontario and here in Alberta too.
Awesome. Thank you. So our first question for today is going to be, for the folks just meeting you, how do you describe the work you do in your own words?
Yeah, so the work that I do is diverse. So my full-time job is the industry development specialist for Southern Alberta. So I work 9 to 5, Monday to Friday, with Indigenous entrepreneurs who are looking to develop their products, businesses, and experiences within the Indigenous tourism sector. So that's a little bit about my full-time job, but I also do run a business on the side, which is consulting for marketing, social media, and really engaging with industry partners who are looking to engage with our Indigenous entrepreneurs as well. So that's a little bit about my job. And so every day I get to be surrounded by creative, like-minded individuals who are looking to not only break cycles, but also inspire the next 7 generations. And so it's a really good job to have, especially because I'm around that energy and I get to be a supporting role in elevating those voices and elevating and empowering those stories.
Awesome. Yeah, no, I really appreciate you even being here today. And so the next question I have is what drew you into the tourism space and as well as marketing and journalism? Because I feel like they all kind of coincide in your world.
Yeah, and you're right for saying that. I started off as a journalist. So I went to SAIT for their 2-year diploma program, and I graduated in 2022, 23. So just at the end of the COVID pandemic. And so I started off with about a year into that industry. And I got to work everything from like editorial magazines. I worked for Avenue Magazine. I worked for Global News Calgary and then Global News National. I've done some investigative reporting. I've also worked with a book publishing company for a children's book company. And yeah, and I've also done like freelancing. So I've done a lot of like freelance writing for different publications all throughout Turtle Island. So that was a bit of my journalism career. And the last job that I had in that realm was with Avenue Magazine. So I really got to really capture the city's ambience through those stories, and also be part of telling those stories beyond words, so visually as well, and getting to explore how a magazine captures those stories. And then that kind of spiraled into the job that I have now. Actually, I was at this like Indigenous Tourism Alberta's first conference here in Calgary, and I was covering it as one of the media, as part of the media entourage covering the stories. And with that, I met the current marketing director, Tom Bayman, and he essentially was like, hey, if you're open to further contract work, like give me a call. I have some creative projects that I'd love for you to take the lead on. And so at the time, my contract was ending with Avenue Magazine, and I was looking for further work. And so I called him up, and one thing led to another, and the contract work eventually yeah, evolved into this full-time position as the marketing specialist. And now that was the first ever role within that workplace because it's very small. Currently, we're at 12 people. And so I
Oh,
was the first person to really ever fill those shoes as the marketing specialist. So the job kept me very busy, and my role was to amplify and share Indigenous tourism experiences and really elevate those stories for social media, for media as well. So that active PR journalism, as well as yeah, the industry communications part as well. So it was a very fulfilling job, and it really just kept me feeling inspired to continue finding those meaningful stories. Because when the time that I spent in journalism, it felt like I was just snowballing from the next thing to another. Because it wasn't it was rich, but not rich enough for me to stay on one topic, to cover one story, one niche. And so when
yeah.
I found these stories within Indigenous Tourism Alberta, it felt really meaningful for me to be able to amplify and share those stories, and the trust that those entrepreneurs gave me to tell their stories. And so I was in that role for about 2 years. And then that led me to my current role, which is the industry development specialist for Southern Alberta. So I manage all Calgary, Banff, going down south to Lethbridge and all those surrounding communities. So it's a very large area, and very much so still rooted in community, rooted in grassroots, and making sure that I'm in relation to all these entrepreneurs and industry partners, and making sure that those same stories are shared responsibly and relationally, and not so much focused on like that creative angle, but more so the honesty behind that and how we can bridge those gaps and create meaningful connections so that we're all at the top and not one way or the other. So that's kind of like my career. It just started off with just simple reporting and led me to where I am now.
Awesome. So, do you have like any particular project or business that was like the most exciting for you to experience?
Yeah, there's been quite a few exciting projects. And some of them weren't necessarily led by me, but certainly had involvement with me. One of those projects being a creative project in my time as the marketing specialist. And so that we worked with a Cree artist, music artist, who had written 3 songs inspired by 3 Indigenous tourism experiences. And we got that printed in the Globe and Mail. And not only did we get it printed, but we got it printed in both syllabics, Cree syllabics, and English. And so it became this beautiful piece that not only empowered this musical artist to write these songs inspired by culture and tradition, but also we got to use that as a revitalization tool for language. And so that was really one of those projects that really I hold close to home. Because it just means so much. And then on the flip side, like on my industry development specialist role, one of the projects that I am excited about is working with the Calgary Stampede and developing a youth mentorship program with Indigenous youth to, help them figure out what tourism is about and building the next capacity for the next generation, and just, yeah, really amplifying the potential of Indigenous tourism and empowering our Indigenous youth to feel inspired and want to be in these spaces, but also making sure that these spaces within tourism is safe for them to exist and for them to work in. So I'm excited to partner with, the Calgary Stampede to make that a reality. And so that's coming up this year. So yeah, those 2 projects really stick out. And another project that I will mention is we also developed a comic book, just a few pages. We've worked with an Indigenous artist who worked with Marvel. And so this artist developed 3 mini stories within the comic book, and they were Indigenous Tourism Alberta experiences. And so a couple of those people who were featured was Buffalo Stone Women, so Heather Black, and Keith from Talking Rock Tours. And so not only did we develop this comic book sharing their stories, but also we got to do a voiceover both in their traditional languages and in English. So again, it was, that revitalization of language and culture, but and also making sure that we are honoring our hiring Indigenous peoples for Indigenous roles, right? And so yeah, so being able to work with that artist meant that we were contributing to Indigenous sovereignty in terms of like Indigenous economics as well. So so these three projects like are meaningful in those ways because we're not only like amplifying Indigenous tourism experiences, but we're also making sure that the dollars that we provide go directly into the pocket of that person or that community, as well as making sure that it's intentional in terms of like preserving culture and amplifying culture as well.
Awesome. No, those are really exciting. And, for me, I've worked with K Days here in Edmonton, and I think there's always so much growth within Indigenous tourism, whether if that's like a big event like that. And I believe that Explore Edmonton is also trying to look for those opportunities for Indigenous students to come in and kind of, be a part of the experience and enrich it as well. So that's awesome.
Mhm.
Do you know the name of the artist that created those songs?
Oh, it's not coming to me, but
Okay.
he's based out of Edmonton,
Yeah. If
and
it
I
does come
believe
to
I believe his last name is for sure, like, Cardinal. I don't remember his
you.
last name, though. I mean, his first name.
Okay. Well, we can come back to it if you find it. Um,
Mhm.
cool. Awesome. So, was there a moment that you realized storytelling wasn't just creative work, but responsibility inside the industry? Um, and is that, would you say, kind of what pushed you forward from journalism more into tourism? Because there's a lot of stories to be told within our community, within the Indigenous economy overall.
Yeah. Well, like whenever someone says like what is indigenous tourism, I like to just share the message that like we've always been storytellers, we've always been creatives, we've always been entrepreneurs, we've always shared our cultures, our traditions, our beliefs. We've always welcomed you into our teepees, our communities, our homes. And it's just like we've done that for a time immemorial, but it's like with that two-eyed seeing approach, we now have those words and those tools to exist in that Western worldview. So while Indigenous tourism has always, the essence of Indigenous tourism has always existed in our ways of life, we just now have that bridge and those words, that vocabulary to say that what we've been doing for so long it is in a way Indigenous tourism. And so because that vocabulary and those conversations have come into existence, now the door is a bit more open for us Indigenous peoples to go into the Western world and say, yeah, like these are our stories, our experiences, and these are my creative ideas. And I'm an entrepreneur, I'm a go getter. And so having these terms and these spaces created allows us to always do what we've done. We just have the tools to do it now in the Western worldview. And for me, it's like I've always had a creative spirit. I've always, even growing up as a young girl, like I've always journaled, I've always done vision boards, I've always wanted to be a writer and like be a published New York Times best-selling author. And, these are dreams that I've held close to my heart. And while I'm not currently a best-selling author yet, I do get to channel a lot of that energy and that inner child aspirations into the goals that I'm, contributing to as an adult. And it became more meaningful for me because when we're allowed to express ourselves creatively, it comes with that reminder that these spaces, these institutes, these organizations weren't always meant for our people. And so, even just being able to exist in that space and bring that creative ideas and those energies with me is like just a testament to how powerful we are and how guided we are and how protected we are. And so, being creative is a privilege because that's something that our ancestors didn't necessarily have. And, some of our living relatives as well, they didn't have that privilege growing up. They had to survive and I get to thrive because of those sacrifices that they made. So being creative became a lot more of a responsibility, knowing that like these are, prayers, these are things that were brought into ceremony for us to exist in these spaces. And so I think about that a lot, like, and that's what makes my creativity and my roles so meaningful for me, because it's part of a collective responsibility. And so there are days where I'm just like, oh my gosh, like there's like just so much cycles to break and all these things, but then I remember that we're all part of the same collective, and it's like, and we continue to break those cycles by allowing ourselves to be creative and pursuing those, and also supporting other creatives too, like, and so it's very much about that reciprocal responsibility.
Awesome. Yeah, no, I totally feel the same. And, for me, I guess it's, I've been kind of telling myself even recently, it's like, I don't want to be famous, but doing stuff like this, it's inevitable, but I'm just doing what I'm kind of being told to do, I guess, like spiritually. Because people need that motivation, they need that role modeling, and they need kind of, someone to show them that they're able to do stuff like that as well. And so I'm just like, okay, well, I don't want to have to post every single day, but I kind of am getting into the motion of doing that just because, what's being done is more important than how I feel about it, right? So
Exactly.
I feel that, yeah.
Yeah, and it's
um,
healing. It's so healing to do that, as
yeah.
much, and I think the reason why we feel so like, oh, like I don't want to like make the posts and do the content and stuff is because we're so like overstimulated by technology these days, right? And it's hard
Yeah.
to be in those digital spaces sometimes when you're constantly operating in it. And so I get it, but at the same time, it is healing because it's all about the intention of your work and the people that you're engaging with, right? And so, and it's important to have role models. Like I think about all of our northern communities that are isolated and don't have accessible resources to health and education and all these things. And it's like, I think it's important that those of us with those gifts who can show up as a role model continue to answer to those calls, because there are people out there, that might be their only lifeline some days, because life can be hard in our northern isolated communities. And they're just like, yeah, and like they live in those third world conditions. And it's like, so I think, yeah, having good role models on any level is so important and so healing, and it kind of takes away from that pressure to like do it all by yourself. And then also for our urban indigenous peoples as well, I've sat as a chair for the Calgary Aboriginal Urban Affairs Committee, and they work closely with the city council. And so we've done meaningful work in terms of like building reports on how the city can answer better to the truth and reconciliation calls and really address the needs of urban Indigenous peoples. Because unfortunately, the case is not that, a First Nations person moves to the city and they're set up for success. If anything, they face more barriers. And so it's really just trying to close those gaps as well. And I think like, yeah, creating spaces where you can be creative and you have those role models in those spaces on any level is super, it's good to see, because it's like you can see each other in those spaces. And I know for me, like it makes me feel less lonely, less afraid, less anxious to be in those spaces when I see another one like me. So it's, yeah, I totally hear you on that.
I mean, so this is kind of off topic a little bit. This is more of a personal share. But, for me, I kind of grew up in between both. So I grew up moving back and forth almost every second year or every year between Edmonton and a small town community, High Prairie. And, one of my parents, they're very reclusive. They struggle with depression, anxiety, and then my other parent, struggles with addiction. And that's pretty normal in Indigenous communities where you are kind of maybe not surrounded, but you have close family members that are struggling with that cycle, right? And, for me, I guess the reason why I've taken so much initiative in being a role model and doing the work is because, I needed that. I needed someone like that to show me that, like, I guess We Matter really opened the door to that, to me being able to speak and open up about these types of things that a lot of Indigenous folks face. And, it's tough because it's very easy to, you know, follow the same cycles as your parents. Whereas, you know, for me, I guess my biggest fear is being an addict, right? Because I've seen that not just with my dad, but kind of roll into my siblings. And so I'm like, and then becoming a parent, it's like, okay, well, I have no choice but to succeed with what I'm doing. And so that kind of draws me forward. But for folks who kind of move from the northern communities or southern communities that are a little bit more reclusive, and they come into the city, it is very hard to find like a positive community, because it's kind of so easy to, see a relative and kind of get into their group of friends, or access what they're accessing. And so what has been like the project um, needs that you guys are trying to meet with the program?
Yeah, well, definitely like creating public spaces that honors traditions. Like in a lot of spaces, there is like rules against smudging and and so
Mhm.
it's just like creating spaces where we can openly smudge if that's something that we're called to. And so, yeah, just addressing some of those barriers, at least in terms of like the urban Indigenous population, just finding spaces where, yeah, they can come to and not have to, yeah, feel pressured to, yeah, do anything else but exist. Because sometimes I find, especially in a progressive city like Calgary, it can be like almost like a fine line between embracing your indigeneity, but then being tokenized by it. So we're really just trying to navigate how we can put those fine lines and boundaries. And then in terms of like the program that I'm working on with like partners like Calgary Stampede and Tourism Calgary, I just wrapped up a Truth and Reconciliation strategy session with Tourism Calgary, and so they're developing a draft of this report that they're going to impose this year after all revisions have been made. And so that report itself just kind of addresses again those urban Indigenous needs. And so we've identified things like having those spaces again that just exist, and not having those barriers in place, but also recognizing that like it's not just a one-man team, it's a collective effort. There has to be that community focus, and then also bringing in those Indigenous governance and knowledge systems into place, because sometimes when we talk about two-eyed seeing, it's always the Indigenous person entering the Western world and operating in that space. And so now we're trying to turn the conversation where the settlers, the allies, can come into our spaces and try to operate in the ways that are beneficial for both parties. So that way it's not so emotionally heavy and heavy on that Indigenous person to constantly go into those spaces. And then of course, like with that youth mentorship program with Calgary Stampede that I'm working on, we want to really address the needs of visibility, representation.
Yeah.
We want to showcase that it is possible for an Indigenous person to succeed in these spaces as well. And because I know in my career path over the last few years, I've always been the first person, the first Indigenous woman to, be that writer, that reporter, that book publisher, that editorial assistant, that marketing specialist. So it's like I've part of my lived experience is being the first in those roles, and it's a lot, and it's like, and it shouldn't be the case like that. I feel like a lot of these institutes and organizations can do better at supporting their Indigenous staff, whether they're contract or full-time, part-time, interns. Like, I think they're just in all three of those spaces, like working with the city, working with Calgary Stampede in the tourism sector, and working within that tourism hospitality sector. I think some of those barriers includes the representation matters, that two-eyed seeing approach, trying to share that responsibility and integrating our governance and our knowledge systems, because something I've also noticed in these spaces that I work in is the checklist approach. So when the Truth and Reconciliation report first came out, a lot of people were like, yeah, land acknowledgements, it's in my email, it's on my website, and we do it now in front of all these events. And it's become part of that checklist approach where it's like, yep, I've done a land acknowledgement. Yep, I've hired an elder. Yep, I've consulted with the nation. And so I feel like that's kind of where things are headed towards, where they're just like, yeah, because I've done these three things, I'm in good hands, I'm a good ally. But then now I'm sitting with people and being like, no, like those are great steps that you're taking, but it goes further than that. To be a relational ally, there is so much more work that needs to be done. And so some of those projects that I'm working on kind of stems to address those issues for sure.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, I totally understand. And with that, I feel like Indigenous time and colonial time are totally different, because when it comes to, protocol, when it comes to an event or knowledge sharing, like it takes time. And, when an elder is speaking, you can't really rush them, right? And so it's like, let's say, for example, I'm working as the education coach within the school system. So a teacher will email me and say, hey, I need a teaching on this subject, and we're talking about it tomorrow. And it's like, okay, well, usually we would have a knowledge keeper come in and share that with you. But considering the timing and, we can't really it's totally different. Plus we have to offer protocol. Plus there are things that we need to do in order to share these teachings, but we can't rush it. Like, this is not, I guess we're kind of following a more natural rhythm of time and space. And then, colonial time is very like, I need it now, I need it done. Like, I just need I need to hit the KPI, right?
Yeah, definitely. And that's something that I continuously try to remind people of, is like, we're working on two different timelines right now. And it's like, and that is the whole point of building relationships, is taking the time to sit with each other, visit, and, go beyond an email and have a coffee together. And so that's something that I'm continuously trying to engage a lot of our non-Indigenous partners and industry related professionals to try to remember. And I sense now that sometimes they realize that, and they're like, oh, but how do I slow down? How do I reach out to an elder and ask if they'd like to go for a lunch? It's almost like they're timid, afraid to reach out. And it's like, I can see that their intentions are there, but they're a bit shy, a bit scared to reach out because they don't want to step on anyone's toes. And it's not familiar in their worldview to engage on that level. But I do like there are people who come to mind who have like said, okay, like this is the only way to build relations with elders. And so I've seen them start off with just showing up at community events, powwows, marketplaces, things like that. And that's just led them through the doorway of building meaningful relations. And I can see how it's impacting their workload, their work environment for the better, because they've intentionally slowed down to build those meaningful relationships. And it's just like, yeah, I would say that's like probably the only barrier is just saying, let's go for a lunch. Let's meet in person. Let's visit.
For sure. So tourism often sells an experience. So how does Indigenous tourism impact Canada's national tourism as a whole? And where do you see the most growth? Where might you see some gaps to be filled?
Yeah, that is a really good question. So I have some facts here that I'm going to read up. One of the most interesting things that I've found is that Indigenous tourism is, of course, like community focused. So my workplace in particular is membership based. And so that just helps us with certain funding requirements, but also with numbers as well. And so not only are we community focused, but we're industry driven. So we work with other organizations like Travel Alberta, Tourism Calgary, Destination Canada, Explore Edmonton, and other destination organizations towards the same goals, the same gaps. And so a fun fact about Indigenous tourism is that 1 of 3 international visitors that come to Canada are actually looking for an Indigenous tourism experience.
Oh,
And that's
wow.
yes, so it's a huge economic opportunity for a lot of our communities and our entrepreneurs. And so they're always looking, yeah, those international visitors are looking for an Indigenous tourism experience because it's an experience that usually means slowing down. A lot of visitors who come to our country are looking for those intentional experiences. To bring home with them. They're not looking for those group bookings or those busy season, busy experiences. And so when it comes to, like, say, for example, you're a visitor and you're looking to go to Banff, most likely they're also looking for those meaningful experiences that make their time in Banff slow down and not just rushing. And so by 2026, we're looking at a revenue of $293.5 million
Oh,
as a country. Yeah. And then for GDP contributions, it's estimated that there will be $143.3 million by this year. And then in terms of like job opportunities, there's an estimation across or at least in the province of 4,000 jobs that could be made available through Indigenous tourism. And so when we look at the GDP impact as of 2023, Alberta, Indigenous tourism within Alberta has contributed around 600 million. And so, yeah, so not only do we have those 1 in 3 international travelers interested in Indigenous tourism experience, but also 62% of Canadians say that they're likely to book an Indigenous tourism experience. And I think that's because all across the board, people are looking for connection. And that is what Indigenous tourism is all about, is providing connection to land, to self, to identity, to your ways of knowing and beliefs, whatever that may be. And so a lot of our experiences are provide that for those visitors that book the experience. And now the other interesting thing is that 55% of Gen X is the demand of each generation is pretty high. So if we look at the boomer generation, we've got 44% of boomers looking to book an experience. 55% of Gen X is looking to book an Indigenous experience. 68% millennials. And then the one that really brings it home is 75% of Gen Z are looking to book an Indigenous experience. And so when we really think about that, like that is the younger generations who are looking to come for those connections, but also build those relations. And so it makes me really hopeful that, 10 years down the road, it's really integrated into both worlds. And so, yeah, so those are some of the facts that I have where just the value and the impact of Indigenous tourism across Canada. And those are just statistics for Alberta. We're not even talking about BC or Quebec, which are the other leading provinces for, the economic impact, job opportunities, cultural revitalization, and things like that.
Yeah, I remember. I think that's where we first met was at the International Indigenous Tourism Summit.
Yeah,
Yeah,
that was. Yes, because I believe you were there as part of a jigging experience. That's where I met you. Yeah.
So from your guys' perspective, how did that go?
It went well. It was memorable. I had so much fun. And just, I think like the important thing about these events is just like having those meaningful conversations. And it's like a lot of the same conversations can be said and overdone with, but I think it's important that we continue to have those conversations. So that event in particular really continued some of those conversations and opened doors to further conversations. And just, so that was like a really impactful event for people to gather and connect and remind ourselves why we're doing this.
I remember when I first walked in to the conference room, I think Shea Bird was on the stage and he was kind of going through the statistics, and I'm like standing there and I'm like looking and I'm like, wow, this is awesome. No, I was very interested in Indigenous tourism after that. And I'm like, how do you even get a job here? Like, this looks so fun.
I know. I'm so fortunate. And it's like we're only growing even more and more as we continue to identify the gaps and the funding opportunities. And so, and like ITA has only been in existence since 2017, and that also a few years were taken off of that because of the pandemic. So we're still very new, and I think that just creates more empowerment for our organization.
So, what would be for any Indigenous, folks who are starting a business or want to get into tourism? What would the process for that look like to be a member of ITA or receive the, I guess, support that they need in order to get into the space?
Yeah, so of course, like it all starts with yourself. Like if you are an entrepreneur and you're looking to start a tourism experience, and the unique thing about Indigenous tourism is that we go beyond experiences. So if you are a service provider in that, like you own a transportation company or looking to start one, or you're an artist and you create art and beadwork, or you're a fashion designer and fashion is your thing, or you are a traditional dancer and you want to provide showcases, or a drummer, or if you are in accommodations, if you own a glamping or you want to start a glamping business or a cabin business, or things like that, really just identifying like what your business is, and of course like we want to say yes to everybody. There's never hardly a time that we say no, and you can apply for a membership online on our website. The only requirement is that your business be 51% Indigenous owned, and we do ask for like your identity roots, just to ensure that when we provide funding opportunities, you do meet that eligible requirement. And so you can apply for a membership, but yeah, just first have your business started, whether that's you've got your name, your business license, your social media presence, website, maybe, just the bare bones of your business. And then if you are accepted for membership at ITA, that's when you get to connect with someone like me in my role, depending on where you are at regionally. And then we just kind of take it from there and identify the next steps in your business for you. ITA does offer cultural programming. So we offer, business programming, I should say. So that's strengthening our roots, which looks at the roots of your business and really tackling some of those things that you're missing, as well as Six Senses, which is our most valuable program, because that's a 6-week program where you're working with top industry Indigenous experience providers, and they're working with you one-on-one to develop your experience. And your experience could look anything from having tea and Danik with an elder and you're sharing creation stories, or you wanting to do a medicine walk. So it's just the experiences are diverse. It's really just identifying what you want, and in that Six Senses program you get to build that out further, and that's kind of what pushes you from being in development to market ready. And at market ready, that's when you start to get included on our like marketing campaigns, and we start pitching you to media, and we start integrating you on our social media channels. And so it's kind of like a collective effort to get your business evolved, but that's what we're here for. It's my job to help your business get to where you want it to be, and it's part of marketing's job to market your business so you continue to be successful and make a profit off of your experiences. And so that's a little bit of like how you can get started as an ITA member, is just applying for that application, and then making sure that you do have a business already established or started. And yeah.
Awesome. Cool. So we're going to move on to storytelling and journalism. So in your experience, what is the process of developing and delivering a story, and how do you find your key message?
So that's something that you think that like it just like you can figure it out from the get-go, but honestly, when for me the process is like I have to sit down with the person and hear their story. But in order for that to happen, I have to build that trust and those intentions, and then they tell me their story, and when I'm post-production writing this story, the angle comes to me, the key message comes to me through that writing. And sometimes it takes like 2 to 3 drafts of the same story to figure out what that angle is and that key message. But really it is, storytelling is also being a good listener. So and sometimes that's a skill that you have to like continue to work on and evolve. But luckily for me, in my cases, like I've just been able to right away just like pick out, oh, that was a good quote, or like what that person said, I'm going to ask a further follow-up question. And so being able to have like really good listening skills, and being able to have that trust with your subject, with your story, and trusting the process of writing the article. Sometimes like maybe I want to go in there and figure out like, oh, what was the story of you becoming a fashion designer? And then the story ends up being, what are the barriers that you face as a designer, and how partners can remove those barriers. And so it's really just trusting the process. And I feel like every writer or every creative has their own process to get from point A to point B, which is probably one of the better things of being a creative, is just being able to hone into those skills. And so it's not always perfect. Sometimes it's ups and downs, and like, oh my God, like, why did I like think this was like such a great idea and all this stuff? But, at the end of the day, the results end up being, impactful, because I spent time with their story and figuring out the best parts of their stories.
Was there ever like a moment or a story that kind of went against your ethics, as like your personal ethics or cultural
Mhm.
ethics?
Yeah, definitely. I did have an experience like that. It was around the time of the 215 graves, and I was working for a media publication, and they had wanted me to go and do some reporting around other residential schools at the time of the 215 graves. And I thought
Mhm.
that was really insensitive, but also tokenizing me because I thought that it would be best if it came from an Indigenous writer. But at the time, they didn't understand that I was grieving those 215 graves and that it was, culturally and spiritually a loss. That's something that I had to carry. And so I couldn't find the words to explain that to them, not only because I was young, but also I didn't know what was coming up for me. I didn't know that was that intergenerational healing that needed to take place. And so that was one of the times where I had to firmly put my foot down and say, no, like I can't write this story. Not only is it inappropriate to ask me that, but it's not does not align with my spirit, with my culture, and I have to honor that right now.
Mhm.
Because those 215 graves, it wasn't discovered for people to go do reporting on. It was discovered for other reasons. And so just, yeah, that was the one experience I had where I definitely came at a crossroads with my ethics as an Indigenous woman and showing up in those spaces.
Wow. No, I'm
Mhm.
super proud of you, and thank you for sharing that.
Mhm. Yeah.
So, what would you say ethical journalism looks like during a time where data sovereignty is now in question? And how do you think it might impact the industries that you work in?
Yeah. I mean, I think it's really important to remain rooted in what's the word? I think when it comes to like ethical journalism in terms of like data sovereignty in these like specific spaces, I think the one thing that we have to remain rooted in is our lived experiences. And I think that's what makes it like different, because with our data sovereignty and the risks and the imposement of like AI and these new technologies being developed, I think like it's really important for us to remain in our lived experiences because those things are never going to be able to compare to that emotion you feel when you hear a drum song or story, or the laughter in the pit of your stomach that comes bubbling up to the surface when you hear a really funny joke. So it's like I think like we just have to remain rooted in our lived experience, and bringing that with us, because I think that's something that not a lot of other people really have as part of their identity. And so with the lived experience comes your ethics. And so, and we're always continuing to evolve with our lived experience. And with that, our ethics always evolve as well. And I think that's what makes, at least our people, our Indigenous people, so unique and
Mhm.
empowered, is because we have those ethics that continuously evolve through ceremony, through storytelling, through sitting with our relatives, through sitting on with the land, and through dreams as well, and just honoring those parts of ourselves. And so, I don't ever really think that like, our technology these days can really encapsulate the spirit of our culture and the spirit of our stories, because they're protected in the ways that there's a reason why it's only orally told, right? And so we have
Mhm.
to remember those ways of beings and knowings, as we continue to navigate AI and technology and data sovereignty, and just remembering, yeah, that our ethics are always rooted with our teachings, with our stories that were given, and we were born with those. And I think it's like part of who we are, and I don't think we could ever lose sight of that, because it always comes back to us, especially when we're struggling through the bad times, right? And it comes through during the good times too, but I think that's what makes the protection so strong are those factors for sure.
Awesome. Yeah, no, I think you lit a light bulb in my mind where it's like, yeah, you know what? I noticed when looking at, let's say, for example, because I'm in Edmonton, Fort Edmonton Park, they can have every story on as an experience, but you can't really experience that humor, like you said. Like you can't really experience that firsthand experience of being Indigenous just by going to an experience like that, unless you're actually being led by an Indigenous tourism, someone who's Indigenous and they're guiding the tour. But yeah, I think, and that's been another issue, you know, for us and our family, because we've done a lot of work in entertainment and in storytelling and keeping the culture alive here in Edmonton, the Métis culture. Our dance group is actually having our 40th anniversary this year, so it's been quite a while, and we've kept the culture going strong. And one thing that we noticed within like Fort Edmonton Park is that they, for a long time, and they've changed this over the years, but for a long time they didn't have Indigenous folks telling the Indigenous stories, but they had them dressed Indigenously. And it was really upsetting for a lot of folks in the community. And I remember one day my grandfather and I were in someone's office. I believe it was after an event, and I think we came to pick up a check or something. And this woman, my grandpa was questioning her, and he was like, you know, another thing to add on to that is that Indigenous people built this Fort Edmonton. They, you know, did the walls, they basically built majority of Fort Edmonton Park, even when it was like just a tourism spectacle, I guess, in a way. And so having non-Indigenous folks kind of taking those jobs to him was an issue as well, and not doing it by hand, because we have a lot of like, you know, technology. We have like all these different mechanical vehicles that can do the work more easily, I guess, and just not staying true to those roots that, you know, Fort Edmonton was built upon.
Mhm.
So that's just a
Yeah,
little
and that's
story.
Yeah, and that's the other issue too. It's like, representation matters. Like, we were inaccurately represented in the wrong spaces for the wrong things, and that's been so harmful. And the impacts of that, of unraveling that and trying to heal that, is heavy, and it's hard emotional, spiritual work. And that's something that I try to always include when I do my cultural awareness facilitations, is just reminding people that the Indian that you see in the textbook or in the museum is not like accurate in today's reality. And so, and then that's also another huge learning, like eye opener for a lot of our allies and industry partners.
Mm-hmm. So, my next question. So I think we kind of talked about this. Do you have any other interests or projects? I know you mentioned that you do plan to be an award-winning author. Is there like a specific genre or like, you
Mm. Yeah, well, projects for me personally, I want to work on this nonfiction book, actually, just discussing um, currently there's like maybe 2 publications around working with Indigenous peoples in media. And so because I do a lot of cultural awareness facilitations and a lot of consulting, I think I would like to write a book about that, about the lived experiences of myself and other people, and just put it into this digestible book for allies to rely on as a resource, as a toolkit. Because while I do get to operate and share that knowledge in spaces and, booked session, I feel like it could be a lot more in depth and not just like surface level. So I would really like to manifest that project into reality, and see what that looks like. And, and I would always stop myself. I was like, oh, well, I have to find an agent. I got to like find a publishing deal. And then it wasn't until I spoke with a self-publishing author that was like, if this work is so important to you, you'll find a way through, even if you end up just self-publishing it. And so I thought that was like a really good eye-opener too, that like I should, stop looking for excuses and just do it, right? And so that's a project that I'm wanting to nourish a little more. And yeah, and then I think also just continuing to like build out my consulting and marketing business as well, and finding opportunities for that to grow.
Awesome. So, one second. I'm just like, I think we kind of covered a lot. So what kind of marketing campaigns do you use for ITA, and which have you found to be more successful? Like, let's say, there's email campaigns, paper, like magazines. Which ones do you find to bring more traffic or get more attention?
I mean, it all depends on the audiences. Like with our newsletter campaigns, that has been a huge success for our members, but also for our industry partners looking for those valuable insights into the industry. And then, to market Indigenous experiences, I would say like, if you're ever scrolling on Facebook or Instagram and you see those like carousel ads, those do well, because it attracts that visitor. And then the nice thing about ITA is that we never click out to our website. It's always going to be the members website. And so you get those direct visitations from those audience. So we pay for all of it and you get to reap the rewards, right? And so that's been successful in terms of like booking experiences. So really just like identifying your certain audiences. Our social media has been great for visitors who are looking for inspiration. We like to call them curious adventurers. And so those are the individuals, and you might identify as one too, that is the kind of a go-getter, independent, and maybe they'll travel with a friend or a partner, and then and they'll just get curious and like kind of book things on their own and not really do it through a third party. They'll just get on and do it. And so just our social media marketing has been really successful in terms of working with that specific audience. And then same with like our ads on Facebook and Instagram. And then of course like our emails and our newsletter most succeeds with our members and our industry partners. So I think like marketing is all about just finding those audiences, and finding keywords and finding the copy that works for them, the imagery that exists or that hits with them, because like it's all about like, oh, someone might connect further with like a couple spa day at an Indigenous tourism owned spa versus a horseback riding adventure that's meant for the solo traveler. So really just trying to captivate those experiences and like trying to find what connects to that viewer. And it's tricky because it changes all of the time, and like algorithm and keywords and things like that do matter. They do play like a strong role in landing with your audience. And like I think like because in today's age, like you have a matter of like 0.2 seconds to get someone's attention online. And so marketing is a competitive position to be in, but it's good once you know some of these mechanisms and these systems. it just gets easier.
Awesome. So for like meta ads, do you try like a few different ones for the same experience or business,
Yeah.
or do you kind of like what's the
Yeah.
process?
So the thing with like Meta is that it'll it's better to always have different ads for the same business because of that identification, that connection piece to the viewer. So, for example, if I was to market Blackfoot Crossing in Sixica Nation, I would have about 6 different ads just for Blackfoot Crossing.
Yeah.
Kind of like angled towards like, oh, are you interested in storytelling? Are you interested in land experiences? Are you interested in cultural events that happen at Blackfoot Crossing? So creating ads that cater to all the things that Blackfoot Crossing provides. And then
Mhm.
that way, when the ad campaign does go out, it kind of spits out the best fit for that viewer based on their algorithm and their keywords. So if they were searching for like cultural events near Calgary, then Blackfoot Crossing could come up because we're paying for those words. And so it's always better to curate 5 to 6 different ads for the same business rather than just one copy for one business and so on and so forth. And of course, like also making sure that you're changing out the images per ad, not providing the same one, and changing out those keywords for sure. So when you look at those meta ads and you say like, come visit Blackfoot Crossing, or come learn with us at Blackfoot Crossing, or experience Indigenous cuisine at Blackfoot Crossing. Like these are all keywords, but they're all catered to the same business, right? Mm-hmm.
And is there any like I'd say tags or keywords that like, you know, folks who have their own business can use in order to get those clicks?
Yeah, of course, like when you're starting out, like it's gonna be like a little bit of back and forth trying to figure out like the audience and what they're looking for, but I think that's where your brand development is really important, like knowing what the story of your business is, because sometimes those things will come out naturally, like those keywords.
Mhm.
Like for example, if you're working on your brand story, and this is something that I do as part of my consultation, is like when you're working on your brand stories, you want to identify those 4 pillars that create your business to be this like moving vehicle. And so within those 4 pillars, you're identifying those keywords and those algorithm pieces and the rest of your brand story. And so again, like that's something that comes along with the journey of starting a business. And it's like, it seems really daunting at first because when you're just like the sole proprietor of a business, you're just like, you're doing all the things. But the more you develop your brand story and the brand of your business, the more these things just naturally come to fit. And so it seems daunting, but it naturally comes. It's part of the
Mhm.
process. Yeah.
Cool. Awesome. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
So how, okay, wait. So if someone wanted to market their business, do you have any more tips for them in that sector?
Yeah, and to market your business, really just look at some of those like accessible resources that you can buy into to start off, and like of course like explore like meta ads within your meta business suite. That's a good place to start because it really is a hands-on process. So Meta will walk you through your growth, your analytics, and spit out those reports for you. But also when you're marketing your business, a lot of it is like word of mouth, like letting people know that this is your business, and showing up in those opportunities in those spaces. So like marketplaces, and just like really building a community of other business owners and just like getting your business out via like word of mouth. You could also even start even smaller and just do like QR codes online. Social media is a huge, huge helper in those ways too, like creating your own content around your business.
Mhm.
And then, yeah, just really, and then when you're ready to and you feel like investing further into your business, really reaching out to those agencies of like, it could be a social media agency, it could be a marketing agency, it could be both, but really just finding out the agency that works for you and your business. That way they can take some of the workload off, but also further help you build your business out. But that's
Mhm.
like a step that not many really take right away because they're still investing in building out their business for sure. Um,
Yeah.
and like when it comes to marketing too, really like figure out like your brand colors, figure out your brand font, figure out those little details. While they may be little, they actually really like make a difference, because those are the visuals people are going to remember, and those are the staples that your business is going to be well known for. And so investing into your brand colors too, and making sure that like your content or whatever aligns with those colors and that font. And so it kind of becomes a tedious process, but it's well worth it when it comes to marketing your business.
Mhm. Yeah, for sure. And yeah, I didn't know that you have your own marketing um, business. So if other folks wanted help, would they be able to come to you if you?
Yeah, they can definitely reach out to me if they'd like to, yeah, just have that one-on-one consulting or coaching session on figuring out the first steps or the next steps of your business. Yeah, like mainly like what I do is I try to support some of that marketing aspects to your business. And that includes like social media and PR and things like that. And I also do like services on like developing your brand further, and things like that. So yeah, if people are looking for a helper, an advisor in those ways, they can definitely reach out to me, like through email or on Instagram. Instagram is more like probably the best way to reach me the soonest.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Okay, awesome. You might hear from me. Just kidding.
Amazing. Yeah.
um, yeah, when I can afford it. So might be a little
Yeah, and that's
while.
the other thing is I do like a pay per rate, so like whatever is affordable for you. Like we work on, because the whole point of my business is to amplify Indigenous entrepreneurs and like removing some of those barriers. And so yeah, that's something that I want my services to be accessible. And it's like, yeah, at the end of the day, making a profit is the goal, but also supporting one another in these spaces. And so, yeah, that's something that I figured I should probably put out there. I
Yeah,
know
oh
price.
yeah, that's good to know. Um,
Mhm.
okay, and so two more questions. Um, the one I'm going to start out with is, what does intergenerational wealth mean to you?
Oh my gosh, what a great question. Wealth, wealth is such a big word. I think intergenerational wealth is not having to worry at the end of the day, like being comfortable with your lifestyle and not having to like uh compromise on your lifestyle. So like being able to financially have wealth in terms of like having your bills paid, a roof over your head, and you have money to support your children, your business, and invest into like social activities and things like that. So definitely like that financial comfortability to afford your lifestyle, but also intergenerational wealth is having abundance, knowing that like you don't have to fight tooth and nail to have a certain aspect of your life fulfilled, whether that's like culture or like materialistic or things like that. Just being able to be in comfort with your lifestyle for sure, for wealth in all areas. And also like thinking about like the next generation, like ensuring that you're breaking those cycles so they can have the same wealth, if not more, having the opportunity to go to school, having the clean home, having a role model, a mentor in their life. And so I think that's also what intergenerational wealth looks like to me too.
Awesome. And our last question, where can people follow you and support your work?
Yeah, definitely on my Instagram, which is just my first name and then my last three initials, which is Lysandra.rnc. That's where I'm most public with all of the things that I'm up to, and the most transparent on what I'm up to, and the most engaged. That platform specifically, the audience on there is like-minded professionals and youth that I've mentored, and other people who are in alignment with some of the work that I'm doing. So I would say my Instagram is probably the best way to support me and to have those connections with me and conversations with me. Mm-hmm.
Perfect. Awesome. Yeah, I will put the link to your Instagram on the video or under the video on YouTube so people
Mm-hmm.
can access it. And I just want to say thank you so much. You've shared so many amazing things, and I appreciate you sharing your time with all of us here. So thanks.
Of course, yes. Make much for having me. I'm so glad that we were able to talk, and hopefully, yeah, everything turns out. I'm so excited for you, Kendall, and your new
Yeah.
endeavors, and I'm just, yeah, excited to be part of it too. Mhm.
Awesome. I'm excited too. All right, so we will close it off for the day. And again, thank you, Kinanas Kumten. And yeah, have a great day.
Thanks.